Give a man an Atari game and he'll turn into a little boy. But don't worry, he'll be grown up enough to share it. Have you played Atari today?
Not yet, but all of that's going to change very shortly. A big thank you to AtGames for sending this ATARI Flashback Gold 50th Anniversary Edition for review. The Atari holds a special place in my heart. It was the first gaming console I ever owned. My sister Tim and I would play for hours together, glued to our TV. The Atari made a big impact on us growing up and holds a tremendous amount of nostalgic value to me personally. This machine comes with 130 classic games built in. Some of these I owned back in the day, but most I didn't. We'll discuss this machine in detail, of course play some games, talk about a brand new firmware update released in June of 2023, and even how you can add your own favorite Atari 2600 games easily. If you're an Atari fan, you're not going to want to miss any of it. I'm John, and welcome to Wagner's Tech Talk. On the written guide, linked below, you'll find additional interesting details about this little console, including a full game list of all 130 built-in games. For those that have links, if you click it, it'll take you to the history of the game. As I find more links, I'll add them to the guide. First things first, let's check out what comes in the box. The packaging is really nice and highlights a few of the more popular titles. Isn't that one of the most adorable little Atari VCS systems you've ever seen? I like the gold switches. They look much nicer than the silver switches on my original system. On the front of the simulated wood grain finish, you'll see the Atari 50 logo. On the bottom, there is a small reset switch, which we'll talk about in a few moments. On the back, you have the right and left controller ports, as well as HDMI, making it easy to connect to your modern TV, and of course the 5-volt power input. Looking closer at the top of the console, we have the main power, left side difficulty, right side difficulty, game select, and a game reset switch. The only thing missing is a switch for the black and white, which was creatively used by very few games to perform other functions. It does have a faux cartridge port, but doesn't provide any function as all the games are built in. The paddles feel very good. Perhaps a little more resistance than the original paddles, however they look identical and work with the original Atari console. The power supply is a very common 5-volt 1A output with a micro USB connector on the end. There are two joysticks included, both use the same 9-pin connector and compatible with the original controller, and again look nearly identical with the exception that the P1 controller has front-facing buttons and an Atari logo in the upper right. They aren't as rigid as the original, which may be a pro or con depending on your preference. It also includes an HDMI cable and a user's guide that has some helpful getting started information. Now that everything's out of the box, let's do a brief size comparison to the original VCS. Yes, this thing is tiny. It's out of this world how similar these sticks look, the left being the flashback version and the right being the original CX40. It's much easier to move the flashback stick versus the original stick, which is very rigid. There is a slightly noticeable weight difference. Let's see by how much. The original is 139 grams versus 105 grams. The flashback stick is 35 grams lighter. If you'll be playing 1 or 2 player joystick games, you'll notice in the lower right P1 or P2 etched into the stick. P1 will go on the left port and P2 on the right. For games that utilize the paddles, you'll plug them into the left port and the P1 stick, the one with the front-facing buttons, on the right port. The P1 stick has buttons on the front, such as menu, allowing exiting a game, select for changing the game variant, start obviously starts the game, and a cool rewind feature that allows you to back up in-game. We'll now plug in the power and the HDMI to our TV, and flip the power switch to the on position. To make the screen easier to see, I'll transition to my video capture device for now. Using the P1 joystick, if I move down to About, you'll notice the firmware version is AR3080 version 1.1.0, which may differ from yours. The Flashback Gold 50th ships with version 1.0.0. However, AtGames recently provided a firmware update that resolves a few usability issues, including paddle movement inconsistency, ability to return back to the menu from within a paddle game, and a few other fixes. I highly recommend updating the firmware. Your next question may be, well, great, how do I do that? I'll place a link to a written guide, which includes a video that'll step you through the process. It's fairly easy and will make your flashback much better. It's the version I will be showing throughout the remainder of this video. After the firmware update, all the built-in games will be the same, but the usability of the machine overall will be greatly improved. Moving to the settings, you'll find 2 pages of themes you can select from. These themes will appear in the background while playing a game. Make your selection, and below you'll find an option to delete all your save states. We'll discuss this momentarily. You can also turn off the background music here. If we move up to the alphabetical option, you'll find a list of all the games that are on this machine. There are 13 pages of 10 games. I'll page through the list fairly quickly. Feel free to pause the video to get a better look. The games include several original Atari games, as you might expect, but also games from publishers such as Activision, M-Network, M-Magic, Coleco, among others. If you grew up playing the Atari VCS, many of the titles here will be familiar, such as Asteroids, Combat, Demon Attack, Kaboom, Pitfall, Yar's Revenge, and so many more. And if you want to filter the game list for Atari games only, select the Atari Games option, and here you'll find 8 pages of games only released from Atari. With the Paddle Games option selected, you'll see a filtered list of games with 2 pages of 13 paddle-only games. Next, we'll discuss some of the Joystick-enabled games. Let's check out one of the first games on the list, Asteroids. After selecting the game, you'll be provided with the basic instructions of how to play the game. Press the fire button again to load it up. Then with the P1 controller, press the start button to start the game. When you're done playing the game, press the menu button, move down to Quit Game, and press the fire button. Next, we'll take a look at a fun Activision game called Barnstorming. If you prefer to have skin lines, which simulate the lines from TVs back in the day, you can press the menu button, move down to Scanline Filter, and flip the switch. This setting is global across all the games until it's disabled, then move up to Resume Game. Perhaps one of the most well-known games is Combat, which is a 2-player game that came included with many Atari VCS consoles. I can't count the number of hours I spent playing this game with my family so many years ago. Demon Attack is a game that is still very fun and challenging. I didn't actually own this game on the VCS, but definitely played it at a friend's house. It has multiple levels that get progressively more challenging. It's pretty awesome to be able to play this game on the Flashback Gold. Another feature I'd like to show you is saving and loading your game states. We'll start up M-Network's Atari version of Burger Time. Now let's say I'm doing really good and I'd like to be able to come back to the same point I am right now. I can press the menu button, select Save Slots, and then pick any of the 5 save slots and press the fire button. Now if I get out in the game, I just press the menu button again, go into the save slots and select the slot, and press up on the joystick. Now I'm back where I left off at the time I saved the game. If I exit the game entirely and return to it with a save state, the console will ask if I want to resume the game. That's pretty cool. Another interesting feature that we'll check out using the game Laser Blast is, let's say you're just humming along, doing pretty good in the game, and dang it, you just got out and didn't create a save slot. Well, you can press and hold the rewind button to go back before you got out. That's a pretty nifty feature. Of all the games on this console, there is one that is a bit out of place, and that's Space Invaders. This is not the original Atari 2600 version of the game, nor the arcade version, but rather a custom port. It's still fun to play, don't get me wrong, I actually enjoy playing it, but something to make you aware of. In a bit, we'll talk about how to add the original Atari 2600 version. There are a few other options to discuss. Under Recently Played, you'll of course see games that were played most recently. You can also add your own favorites. If we move up to My Favorites, you'll see several I've already marked. To add it, navigate to the game you want to mark, then press the Game Select option on the console, and then when you return back to My Favorites, you'll see the game listed. There are lots of great games for you to explore on the console that utilize joysticks. What you've seen so far is just a very small sampling. Next, we'll check out some paddle games, and then I'll show you how to add your own games to the system for any that aren't included that you want to play. Now let's check out some paddle gameplay. For paddle games, you'll want to have the P1 stick plugged into the right port and the paddles plugged into the left. You'll then use the joystick to navigate to the paddle games menu. As we discussed earlier in this video, you'll definitely want to be sure you've updated the firmware so that the paddle movement is consistent. Let's start up Kaboom and give it a whirl. With 13 paddle games, there is a lot of retro fun to be had. Also, many of the games, such as Video Olympics, or better yet known as Pong, have many variations on the game. You can press the select button to choose from any of the game variants, and of course with 2 paddles available, you can play an exciting game of Pong with a friend. Next, we'll discuss how to add your own games. As mentioned, yes, you can add your own games to the ATARI Flashback Gold. First, you'll need a FAT32 formatted USB stick. You also need a micro OTG cable, such as this one. Links to both that I used here are in the written guide. Just plug the power into the OTG cables port, the other micro USB in to the console. To copy your games, the guide will step you through it, but we'll briefly discuss the steps here. From the table of contents, select the expandability section. Here you'll find links to the items I used and verified to work. Under that is a section on adding more games. In Windows, you'll be able to format a USB stick as FAT32 as long as the drive is 32 gigabytes or less. Then create a single folder called Game on the root. Inside the Game subfolder, copy your ATARI ROMs that have a file extension of .A26. Now safely eject the USB stick from your PC and insert it into the female USB port on the OTG adapter while the console is powered off. Now power on the console. The USB stick I used has an LED indicator that shows it's being identified when the machine is powered on. Once the machine boots up, which takes only about 10 seconds, at the bottom you'll see a new category, EXT USB drive. If we select that, we'll find all the games we added. When adding games, make sure there are no spaces in the file name and that the name is 13 characters or less. From here, we'll select a game that was popular for all the wrong reasons. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. That's enough of that one. How about Donkey Kong? Published by Coleco, this is one I played a lot as a kid thanks to my uncle that picked it up for my birthday. Oh, the memories. And we can't forget the original Space Invaders. This game sold a lot of consoles in the early 80s and was one of the top sellers. Oddly enough, it was outsold by Pac-Man. Go figure. There is a massive library of additional VCS classic games that you can explore and play on this console. Some that are memorable and you'll still love playing today, yet others not so much. Now we'll discuss APL or Arcade Play Link. One lesser known feature is that the Flashback consoles support APL or Arcade Play Link. That is, if you own a Legends device such as the Legends Ultimate Multicade, you can simply plug in the HDMI cable to the HDMI port and both the video and the control movements are sent over a single cable. You will need to power the Flashback. It can either come from the Legends device or the original power source. From here, you can press the channel button and use the joysticks on the Legends Ultimate to play the games. At the time of this video, There are some limitations, so check out the APL section of the guide for any updates. Now let's check out a handful of games playing through the Flashback using the arcade control panel on the Legends Ultimate. I couldn't locate a definitive answer, but I assume Video Pinball was likely one of the very first virtual pinball games. The Atari version of Centipede was a decent port of the game and garnered 11th place in their bestseller list. And finally, Yar's Revenge is a very fun and challenging Atari game developed by Howard Warshaw and is Atari's best-selling original game for the Atari 2600. That brings us to the end of another video. I think the Atari Flashback Gold 50th Edition certainly brings back the nostalgia of the original Atari VCS or later 2600. The controls look and operate very similar to the original and can actually be used as a replacement for the original controllers as well. That combined with 130 built-in games and the ability to add your own makes the console a win in my opinion. This is, of course, based on using the machine with the latest firmware applied. A huge thank you to AtGames for making their product the best it could be. The update was needed and very much appreciated. What do you think of the Atari Flashback Gold 50th? Have you applied the update? If so, please share your experience in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by clicking the like button. If you enjoy content like this and haven't already subscribed to the channel, I hope you'll consider it. And with that, I look forward to talking with you again very soon.